I would like to start off by saying, it's me, Mario. The Super Nintendo, the 16-bit retro-futuristic contraption that delighted thousands of silly children around the world during the 1990s. Obviously, this game console did not sprout out of the ground one day, like, say, a Cabbage Patch Kid. No, dear viewer, it was the result of many years of work and development. Today, on this episode of Down the Rabbithole, we will explore the history of the Super Nintendo 16-bit entertainment system. My name, darlings, is Paris. Let's start this Nintendo tale from the very beginning.
When you decide to step up to this kind of power, this kind of challenge, this kind of flying, crashing, feeling, when you decide to get serious, there's only one place to come: the games of Super Nintendo. No one else creates this kind of experience, because no one else creates these kinds of games. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Nintendo was founded in 1889 by Fushajiro Yamauchi, and its original business plan was manufacturing Hanafuda playing cards. How quaint. In 1902, Mr. Yamauchi started manufacturing the first Western-style playing cards in Japan. The company's main feature was manufacturing various types of playing cards for decades, and even sold cards with Walt Disney characters printed on them in 1959. In 1973, the company developed a laser clay shooting system which rivaled bowling as a major pastime in Japan. This is where the first tremors of video game fabrication begins. It wasn't until 1974 that Nintendo started developing arcade machines, and the modern company we are familiar with began to take a more recognizable form. In 1977, the company develops its first home-use video game system in cooperation with Mitsubishi Electric, the TV Game 15 and TV Game 6. These look super cool and retro, by the way. I'm tempted to see if I can get my hands on a cheap, refurbished copy or replica. Anyways, in 1981, Nintendo first developed and distributed the coin-operated video game Donkey Kong. Yes, darlings, that Donkey Kong, with the simian supremacist himself, DK, and a mustachioed working-class hero, Mario, and everyone's favorite revolutionary hero, Luigi. The video game quickly became the hottest selling individual coin-operated machine in the business, and the company started getting ideas about its future direction. In 1983, the company built a new plant in Uji City to increase production capacity and to allow for business expansion. In July, Nintendo listed stock on the first section of the Tokyo Stock Exchange and started work on the home video game console known as Family Computer, aka Famicom, employing a custom CPU, custom processing unit, and PPU, picture processing unit. In 1984, Nintendo developed and started selling the unique twin-screen interactive coin-operated video game VS system. At the same time, the company launched the Famicom system in Japan. It was renamed to Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, which it launched worldwide. However, it wasn't all coins, power-up mushrooms, and radioactive stars in Nintendo land, my darlings. Nintendo was not the only video gaming console kid on the block, and they would soon come into competition with Sega. So back in the 80s, you kind of had Atari until they kind of imploded. So by 1985, when the OG Nintendo Entertainment System came rolling about, there was really nothing that could compete with it on the market. The SG-1000 from Sega never reached American shores. Instead, it was upgraded into the Mark III in 1985 and marketed in the US as the Sega Master System. However, it just didn't have the graphics or the game portfolio to compete, and Nintendo remained the dominant and undisputed home video game contraption worldwide, for now. In 1986, the Nintendo Entertainment System was launched in Europe and instantly became a major hit. Sega got the memo and knew that 16-bit was now the way to go if they wanted to get a technical edge over their competitors. In 1985, Sega's Mega Drive was released in Japan, but it failed to wrestle NES's hold over the gaming market. In 1989, it was released in North America as the Sega Genesis. The competition was heating up, and this is where our titular console comes into play. Despite the technological advantage, Sega only really managed to challenge Nintendo in Europe. Sonic wasn't on the scene yet, and nobody was sure how Nintendo would respond, if at all. Nintendo knew they could no longer be complacent and had to upgrade their hardware into the 16-bit age. If the plumber hoped to trounce the hedgehog, Nintendo would have to embrace. Many talented and smart individuals who worked on the NES, both in the United States and in the Japanese market, were recruited for this new venture. They knew that the successor to an already classic and lauded game system needed to be special. Nintendo assigned the head designers from the last class to their respective markets: Masayuki Yumura and Lance Barr. Yumura would be the boss man for the Japanese market, Lance Barr would be lead designer for the North American market. Yumura leaned into the design of the OG NES and settled on a look that would satisfy the ever-changing, demanding, and nerdy Japanese market. Meanwhile, Lance Barr would design the SNES for the North American market and make just a couple of alterations to the Japanese iteration. Barr would roughen up the edges as he opted for an edgier design for this console that he felt would appeal to the American market. You know, because American kids in the 90s were extreme and totally rad. I just want to take the moment to apologize for any Japanese names that I mispronounce. Umaru was also tasked with improving the sound capabilities of the SNES. He collaborated with a Sony technician named Ken Kutaragi, who didn't tell any of his superiors that he was working on a Nintendo product. Oops. This little side quest involving a Sony employee will become important in the future console cock-swinging contest involving the PlayStation. May I remind you, it's not rude if I am indeed referring to a male chicken. Umaru and his design team were able to set out and create one of the most advanced pieces of sound technology found in a video game at the time. The product was called the SPC700, an audio chip that was technologically superior to competitors, not to be confused with SCP. In addition to a trailblazing sound chip and two unique designs created for two regional markets, Nintendo also bolstered the graphical capabilities of its system with the invention of Mode 7. Mode 7 was a graphics mode that allowed the devs to alter and manipulate the background layer, giving the perception that the game was presented in 3D. It was a truly game-changing, pun intended, graphical achievement from Nintendo. Mode 7 was one of the SNES's main technical attractions in their marketing in both Japan and the US. Nintendo retained good relations with many of the prominent third-party publishers that created brilliant games for their last console. Companies like Square, Capcom, and Konami were now pushing out beautiful and fun titles like Secret of Mana, Mega Man, and Castlevania respectively. Nintendo was ready to enter the 16-bit era of gaming swinging. Let's go. Nintendo released the Super Famicom, aka the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, on November 21st, 1990 as a Japan exclusive. Upon release, the console immediately sold out all 300,000 of its available units. The SNES was an instant hit. The following year, the SNES would be released to Europe in April, Australia in July, and North America in August. In the States, the console retailed for $199 and came bundled with Super Mario World. However, despite the massive success, it wasn't all coins, power-up mushrooms, and radioactive stars. In Nintendo Land, the console wars were now officially on. Now, Sega and Nintendo have had beef since the Nintendo Entertainment System era. Sega swung and missed 3 times with the SG-1000, SG-1002, and the Master System. None of them could hold a candle to the NES. However, things slowly changed once Sega began to carefully craft a voice for their products and an actual identity for their brands. By 1994, Sega had dramatically increased their marketing and also started throwing hands. Sega released the notorious Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does
16-bit arcade action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade hits.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does
What Nintendo don't. The 16-bit Genesis system by Sega. Genesis does it all.
They were not playing anymore. Also, typical 90s style extreme advertisements such as "Welcome to the new level" was spreading brand visibility.
Welcome to the next level! Said he was going to be right back. He was normally a very quiet boy.
Sonic the Hedgehog was introduced in 1991 and was also a massive hit with American audiences. He was cool, had an attitude, and did the Bruce Lee finger wag. Sehr cool. And also remember as a kid, I remember watching the cartoon and he would do these after school specials, and after something bad would happen, he would go like, "That's no good.
That's no good."
Sega's aggressive North American marketing strategies were working, and Sega eventually overtook Nintendo's market share. However, Sega would not be the top hedgehog for very long, and the mustachioed empire struck back. Nintendo responded with their own playful jabs with marketing like "Play It Louder," alluding to the groundbreaking tech used to create their sound chips via their under-the-table collab with Sony. Anyways, there was a lot of cool reasons the SNES was cool other than the software and the marketing. The SNES controller, for example, is a piece of ergonomic design and artistry. More buttons and shoulder triggers were added to enhance gaming depth and complexity. It allowed developers to create more intricate gameplay mechanics. Game controllers became crucial for improving overall gaming experiences. This allowed for refined control over character movement, making games more immersive. The SNES game controller really set a new industry standard and is still, loved to this day. The American controller is slightly different from the Japanese and the PAL controllers. Instead of each button being a different bright color, the A button and B buttons were purple, and the remaining were lavender. Tying into the mechanical color scheme of the Super Nintendo's American model, these games came in these charming little cartridges, and no, blowing on them does not cool off the system and can indeed damage the components. This is considered one of Nintendo's golden ages, and it pushed out beautiful, fun, and engaging titles like Harvest Moon, Star Fox, Bomberman, Street Fighter 2, The Lost Vikings, Super Mario Kart, Super Punch-Out, Tetris, F-Zero, Mega Man, Donkey Kong Country, Mortal Kombat 2, Final Fantasy 2, Castlevania, Kirby, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Super Mario RPG, Super Mario World, Earthbound, Legend of Zelda, and many, many more. In 1996, Nintendo 64 launched in Japan on the 23rd of June. A console 4 times as powerful as the SNES, though not nearly as successful. Thousands lined up to be the first to experience the world's first 64-bit home video game system. Meanwhile, the Super NES saw the release of the third game in the continuing Donkey Kong series, Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. A year later, Nintendo of America stopped shipping SNES games to stores. Shortly after the release of their last first-party game for the system, Kirby's Dream Land 3. The SNES was ultimately discontinued in 1999 in America and 2003 in Japan. The last official titles published for the console were Frogger 1998 in North America and Metal Slayer Glory Director's Cut 2000 in Japan. Today, the Super Nintendo is still considered one of the dankest video consoles of all time. People still play the games in their classic or slightly modified forms, and Nintendo also sells its own fancy retread of the device, the classic mini Super Nintendo. The hardware of the console itself is smaller than the original kit and already comes preloaded with 21 games. Thank you for watching this episode of Down the Rabbit Hole, a bit of a lighter one. I really actually want to buy that Super Nintendo Mini Classic myself. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. My name is Paris Rivers, this is Down the Rabbit Hole. This has been a retrospective. See you in the next episode.